Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and if you have any opinions at all you would like to share, leave them down in the comment section. Tory Lanez, the new Toronto 3. Tory Lanez is a Canadian singer, rapper, songwriter, fairly active in the latter half of the 2010s, releasing 4 studio albums in the past 3 years, not to mention the 18 mixtapes that have been flowing from him throughout the entire decade. He's been fairly busy, especially during these times, hosting the whole quarantine radio thing on Instagram, dropping 2 projects in the span of 4 months, both being rather heavy hitters in Tory's discography. The first one was the 5th installment in his MIXTAPE series, featuring Tory delving into more of his singing, and the second being the 3rd installment in his new Toronto series, which features him dealing with more of a rapping style, which is the album I'm reviewing today. Tory even mentioned on Instagram, after this mixtape was delayed, that he actually had to dumb down his creativity due to label issues, which doesn't really leave that good of an impression. So where does this mixtape stand? Let's find out as I review it track by track. We'll start with the singles, with there being 3 of them. The first one being Broken a Minute, which features this melody that sounds like a very processed saxophone. Normally, I really love this, but it gets so repetitive so fast when paired with a very scant percussion and dense bass. Tory has a very aggressive and pretty engaging flow over this, though that's easily the best part of the song, but even though it's only 2 minutes and 12 seconds, it really feels like an eternity. Lyrically, I mean, the title is kinda obvious. He brags about how much money he's got, fairly standard stuff, and how he hasn't been broke in a minute. I personally would have changed the beat once, maybe twice throughout the runtime, but I can honestly take this or leave it overall. The second single, Do the Most, is such a hard track, and it's definitely got all of it to do with that instrumental. God, it is so infectious with that skittering, yet also clapping percussion at the same time. That bass is also really good, and especially that explosion of the entire instrumental at the end of practically every couplet just gives this track that exhilarating vibe that it really needed. Of course, Tory's also got a very versatile flow. He glides over this track like it's nothing, and lyrically it's mainly about women this time, trying to stay loyal to one, but the fame means he's actually got a lot of side bitches. While I do hate that the song isn't even 2.5 minutes long, I adore the track regardless. Awesome song. And the third and final single, Who Needs Love, features a very nice acoustic guitar playing as the main melody, giving the track a kind of Latin, breezy style to it. The drums and bass give the song that extra kind of bounce to make the song feel not completely sleepy, and not to mention Tory's flow yet again, it's just so appropriate for this. Although, I do feel a little bit of a Trippie Redd influence from this track, especially after his track of the same name that was released on his latest mixtape, A Love Letter to You 4. Along with this track being a fairly normal length of just under 3 minutes, and him rapping about not dealing with women, but being happy with money, it can get repetitive after a while. Overall, it's still a good song, and not a bad singles run either. Let's see how the rest of the mixtape fares. Now for the rest of the tracks. The opener, Pricey and Spicy, features this incredibly epic instrumental, feeling like the closing number that would play during the credits of a thriller movie. The only problem with that is that that instrumental requires a very specific tone to properly match that. And while Tory definitely does have the volume, his nasally yet still deep vocal tone clashes and kind of sets it off in the wrong way, along with his flow being a bit more of a standard trap flow, which also clashes negatively with this beat. Lyrically, the track is simply about how his products are all pricey, the Givenchys and the Saint Laurents. This track's kind of a dice roll for me. I could be feeling it, another day not so much. The Coldest Playboy, despite being barely 2 minutes, it takes nearly half the track to properly get into motion. The opening bit feels very similar to Pricey and Spicy. Pretty ethereal instrumental, not as grand but still nice and calming to listen to. The rest of the track is simply one verse, and it's kinda underwhelming. Tory sticks to a bit more of a deeper flow, and unfortunately that tone sucks away a lot of the energy of this track and Tory's voice in general would have had otherwise. Lyrically, it's basically about a comeback story, dealing with a dead relationship but then coming back with the money and the trap connections. Not a bad song, but again, it's underwhelming. Stupid Again finally brings us back to actually fire music. First off though, I love how it opens up with Conor McGregor as Champ Champ, and then the beat kicks in with a nice roaring energy with its pretty loud synths, nice bass and standard percussion. Tory is easily the best part of the track. His tone is very invigorating and his flow changes rather consistently. It's a very engaging track, and lyrically it seems to be about drug abusing, going stupid as rappers tend to call it, along with talking about women, money, still standard stuff overall. While I don't care for some of the spoken word passages later on in the track, it's still a fun song regardless. 10 Fucks featuring label affiliate MIXTAPE is meh. I'm not really feeling this one like any of the others. I think the biggest reason why is the contrast between Tory's louder voice and just how minimalistic that instrumental is. It's almost just bass and percussion, nothing special. Thankfully, MIXTAPE gives a little bit of a deeper delivery for a bit, but then switches out of nowhere to almost like a Playboy Cardi baby voice mimic, completely killing a lot of the momentum it was building up to. Lyrically, it's about not really giving a damn what a bitch has to say, even though the line, "give at least 10 fucks," does mean that he does care, so it's a little bit contradictory. However, I can definitely do without this track. Pass. Dope Boy's Diary is yet another mixed song for me. For one, I really love that piano in the instrumental, especially in the beginning, but then when the entire thing blossoms, it kind of falls a bit in the background, which really sucks. Tory's really disappointing vocally on this track. He's actually off the beat for a good majority of the verses, which personally bothers me, and especially with the track being the full 3 minutes it is, it's almost like a torture fest. Despite the lyrics, which are probably the best part of the song, and basically about a lot of the struggles with relationships, finance, cops, and gangs. I just kind of wish the song as a whole had more of a cohesive musical aspect to match the lyrics. So, it's okay. Accidents Happen featuring Lil TJ has an extremely similar beat to Dope Boy's Diary, with the piano being very muted. However, the percussion just feels like so much more overall, and Tory's vocals finally feel like they fit again. He sounds great, maybe a little bit too loud, but aside from that, his verse is great. And the chorus is okay, with Tory flexing more of a falsetto, which is a little bit much. Lil TJ is also pretty good, getting his Lil Tecca on vocally, but with less harmonies, and I can totally get down with that. It's pretty enjoyable. Lyrically, it's just about how they got all this money, but it wasn't on accident. I'll take this track. This is a good one. PAIN is kind of a dragging track, especially regarding the instrumental, which is at such a slow tempo. Considering that title, I'd understand that it wants to take a slower approach, but Tory's very loud, less than emotional delivery really makes it seem like such a slog to get through. It just feels really cold, which I suppose I can give it props for yet again considering the title of the track. So I suppose it is actually fairly appropriate in the long run. And lyrically, Tory's rapping about his struggles with his childhood and how people don't seem to understand his pain. Yet again, the lyrical game reigns supreme. But in all honesty, Tory could have probably toned it back, like, a lot. So, meh. Adidas is a pure bar track. Very slight intro, very slight outro, one verse, and okay, this is an awesome song. Unlike plenty of the other tracks, Tory and the instrumental actually blend together. The biggest difference between that, Tory actually toned down his delivery to match the pretty scant beat, with some very airy percussion and synths and quite silent bass. His flow is also very consistent, and while he doesn't change it up too much for a track like this, I can definitely look past it. Lyrically, unsurprisingly, it is pretty dense, basically about reflecting on his past and the many moments in his life, proceeding to lay out goals for the future. While I may not be the biggest fan of him turning into an even higher pitched YK Osiris for the outro, this is a great song, worth a listen. Penthouse Red features more of the same calming Latin-inspired acoustic guitar picking that was present on Who Needs Love. This is probably one of the most melodic tracks in this entire mixtape, with Tory working more of his singing voice throughout the majority of the track. That's definitely helped by this instrumental as well. The bass is toned back quite a bit, letting the percussion be the main attraction of the beat, really accentuating this whole R&B vibe the track gives off. Lyrically, unsurprisingly, it's a bit more of a sex song. I mean, not much else to really say there, aside from it being a pretty good song. Letter to the City 2, which was a sequel to Letter to the City, which featured on his original The New Toronto mixtape, really gives us this Rick Ross inspiration, with its very stagnant flow and pretty low-tempo instrumental. Of course, Tory and Rick Ross are completely on opposite ends of the spectrum vocally, but thankfully that instrumental steps in, making it feel a bit lighter with the more prominent piano. And lyrically, it's definitely more personal, with Tory rapping about reminiscing over his early life, being homeless in his hometown, and signing his first record deal. This is another track I really enjoy. Back in Business really feels like a clone of Letter to the City 2, with that whole Rick Ross vibe to it, but this time multiplied by 10. Even with the instrumental getting a lot deeper and ethereal in the process, and Tory's voice getting deeper as well, although his voice is probably the best part of the song. Even lyrically, this one also feels like a Rick Ross track, being about living in the streets, being surrounded with shooters, and slightly mentioning women. With the track being over 2 minutes, it just drags so much, and unfortunately it doesn't feel as epic as the instrumental would entail. Meh, I could do without this one. Pass. D&D, which actually stands for Do Not Disturb, not Dungeons & Dragons, unfortunately, as I was hoping for, is the shortest track on this mixtape, not even cracking 2 minutes long, and It's not a bad track. Tory provides some much needed energy, and it's not too loud and intolerable. However, the instrumental is, yet again, pretty quiet and out of the loop. The bass is pretty chunky though, along with the percussion being pretty dense and at the forefront. But there's no real lead melody to this beat, giving the track a bit of a dour feeling despite Tory's voice. Lyrically, yet again, more standard stuff, money, women. This one's pretty disappointing. And finally, the closer MSG, or Message for God's Children, only goes on for one verse. No hook, no intro, no outro, and yeah, this is a very fitting way to close off the mixtape. The number one thing that sold me on this track is Tory's voice. He sounds extremely serious as he's rapping over this instrumental, which is perfect. It's similar to D&D, but the lead is way more in the front and just blends in so much more with Tory's voice. Lyrically, it's about religion and his beliefs, and how they've changed over the years, and that got him to who he is now. Great song, fantastic closer. Overall, this mixtape, it was fairly okay. Sure, there were a lot of questionable production choices a lot of the time, and I'm still not the biggest fan regarding Tory's voice, but there were still some pretty respectable bangers on this mixtape, and some definitely worth checking out for sure. Although, really, there's probably only about half of the tracks here I'd actually return to, and everything else was either bad or just plain disappointing. So, fittingly, I'm feeling about a 5 out of 10 on this mixtape. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.